I'm Greg Kesich, the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald. And instead of the usual columnist roundtable, this week on the podcast, I'm sitting with Randy Billings, who is our City Hall reporter and is the guy I go to when I want to know what's happening at City Hall or why it's happening at City Hall or what the heck was that story about. So, Randy, this week the city passed a $345 million budget with very little controversy. For the first time that I can remember, that there hasn't been huge cuts of any kind, no program cuts, no major changes. So it went very smoothly, right? No drama.
It did up until the Finance Committee's review before the council had their vote. And that's when the idea was broached that, maybe it's time that we took a look at this assistant to the mayor position.
Yeah. So I was actually kidding about that because it was incredibly dramatic. It was a really long meeting, is that right? And a very emotional meeting, and it was over that position. So could you tell me the story? So how did that play out that night?
Yeah, well, that night it was, councilors, they debated this issue for a very long time. It was emotional. The mayor made a very impassioned plea about the need for this position. And councilors.
And what is it exactly? What did the guy do?
Yeah, so the assistant to the mayor, they created that position a little over a year ago. And the position is tasked with helping the mayor respond to constituents, speech writing, helping to schedule meeting with outside advocacy groups, and sitting in on meetings when the mayor himself cannot be there. Uh-huh. So they decided shortly after Ethan Strimling was elected mayor in 2015 that they wanted to create this position. From what I can gather, Ethan went around and asked councilors if they would be open to having this position, and he got sort of their consent to go ahead and do this, and they did it outside of the budget process. And next thing you knew, there was a posting on the city website for an assistant to the mayor with pay approaching $75,000 a year.
Uh-huh. And so this guy was making a little less than that, right? We should say his name.
Jason Shedlock.
Jason Shedlock.
They hired him. They had a pretty robust pool of applicants, even though they had a very short window for having people apply. And next year he would have earned $69,000, a little more than that, almost $70,000.
And using my PS15 math, I determined that's 0.02% of the city budget.
I'll take your word for that. Indeed.
0.02 of the 345. So this was not really your normal budget debate, right? They were not, and it wasn't really about Jason Shedlock either, right? It was really about his boss.
Right. Everyone that I talked to has a lot of respect for Jason. It was never anything personal. But, councilors got a lot of pushback from their constituents when they created this position. And it landed like, a lead balloon for a lot of them. They decided that they were going to give it a shot and see how the position played out. But, there are still a lot of people out in Portland who, don't believe the city needs an elected mayor because the mayor, as it is now, he doesn't run the city manager does, but he has a full-time presence in City Hall. And, he's tasked with coming up with policy and implementing the council's goals, through the city manager's office. So I think the opponents of that position, they said, if we have an elected mayor, this office is going to grow. It's going to grow. He's going to want his own staff. It's going to cost more and more money. And as soon as they started advertising for that position, it was an I told you so moment.
Right.
And they've been hearing about it ever since then.
But the position was in the budget from the last year. And the way things normally work in government is that once that job is in there, it's there, and people are just going to forget about it. But they didn't forget about it this time. And it really struck me as even though they all deny it, it's kind of a direct attack on the mayor by a majority of the council. I think he saw it that way too.
He definitely saw it that way. When they were debating cutting the position, he said they were undermining democracy because it was affecting his ability to reach out to his constituents. Councilors across the board, even those who voted against removing the position, they said, we're looking forward to having this discussion publicly because we didn't do it the first time. And we owe the public, a public discussion about whether this position is needed and whether it's not. And, over the mayor's year and a half in office so far, he was elected as being a collaborator. He described himself as being a listener in chief. He launched his campaign when the previous mayor was at loggerheads with the council because that mayor didn't listen, never consulted them with what he was doing outside of the council. And Ethan said, look, I run a nonprofit. I know the mayor needs to be the chairman of the board of directors, and we need to execute the will of the council, and I'm the guy that's going to do that. But over the course of that year, it seems like he failed to produce on that, and that grew tensions on the council. And several councilors pointed to this assistant to the mayor position as exacerbating that, because rather than looking to councilors to help him develop policy and goals and things like that, he had someone in his office that was helping him just do it kind of on his own, and then he might hold a press conference to announce an initiative, or drop it a major amendment at the meeting that would take people by surprise, and that kind of turned a lot of councilors off.
So what was the meeting like?
The meeting was really intense. After Belinda Ray introduced her amendment and argued on behalf of it, the mayor used up at least 10 minutes. Typically, a councilor or mayor gets 10 minutes on each issue, but he had a speech, and he made a very impassioned plea about, tying this to, having a good functioning democracy. And then councilors one by one went around. Spencer Thibodeau was, perhaps the most emotional in counterpointing the mayor, basically saying.
And he's somebody who ran for council as a kind of protege of Ethan, right? I mean, he was an early. They ran the same year. He was an early endorser of him.
Yeah, and they were pretty close early in the term, but. It was just it was like their relationship stress was like really brought to bear, and there was this one moment in the meeting where
soap opera at City Hall.
It really was, because Spencer was like, you've isolated yourself, you're on an island, and this assistant is the reason, and he like practically begged the mayor. He said, like, look, come back to the council, come back and collaborate, like we will be here. And then immediately after that, the mayor, very strongly said, look, if you want to collaborate, this is only going to make it worse, and it's not going to happen if you go ahead and do it. And then what did the council do? They went ahead and did it.
I mean, it's a little odd. He says that it's an attack on democracy, but it sounds like he got outvoted, which I think is the definition of democracy. There was six councilors decided to do without the position.
Yeah, I think some would definitely say that. Yeah,
right.
And and he and some outside political advocates also tried to frame this as a petty political maneuver of Belinda Ray because she disagrees with him on some policy issues, namely the school bond, and it's been framed as this fight between the city manager John Jennings, who has all the power in City Hall. Really, I mean, he runs City Hall. And the popularly elected mayor, and it just really got visceral and vitriolic, in some of that rhetoric. I mean, there was one person in the public comment who described Councilor Belinda Ray as a little bird eating the regurgitated words of city manager John Jennings. Now
that's an image.
That is. I did not
that's
put
something.
That
Right.
I did not put that in the story.
Thank you for not putting that in the story, and we'll try to unthink that one. This might be a good time to put some context on this, because I think a lot of people are confused about the form of government for Portland. It's changed relatively recently. So what is Portland's government, and what does the mayor do? What does the city manager do? What does the council do?
There is definitely a lot of confusion about this, and chief among the people who seem to be confused are those who are elected mayor.
Yeah, right. All those people I just mentioned actually are kind of mixed up.
Yeah, so I mean, for decades, nearly a century, the city had a city manager, council form of government. So the 9-member city council would hire a city manager. He would run the day-to-day affairs of the city, and the council would pass policy. The council among itself would nominate and vote for someone to be called mayor, but it was just a chairman of the board. They would run the meetings, they would attend the ribbon cuttings and all that. But they formed a charter commission, and in 2010, the voters of the city. Over 20,000 people showed up. 52% of them voted in support of having a popularly elected mayor. But they voted for this hybrid system, which is pretty unique to Portland because they didn't turn over the day-to-day operations of the city to the mayor. So they would call that a strong mayor position, where the mayor has the ability to hire and fire people and reorganize departments. And they didn't do that. All that power stays with the city manager. Instead, they created a full-time presence in City Hall, full salaried. Next year, the mayor will make around $73,000.
And that's based on some calculation of median income.
It's 1.5 times the area median income for families. And that full-time presence in City Hall is basically the extent of his power. He's expected to, execute the policy vision of the city council and the city. And, his way of doing that is through having the ability and time to organize, get the council behind, certain ideas, and then additionally, advocate for the city up in Augusta. But as far as like any hard powers of hiring, firing people, having direct communication with city staff without going through the city manager and things like that, that position doesn't really have it.
Now, this is our second mayor. Michael Brennan served from 2011, or he was elected in 2011, and Ethan Strimling was elected in 2015, and it was there was one set of problems with the previous administration, and that seemed to be around the kind of the personality of the mayor. He was seen as not working collaboratively with the council and had projects. Am I right? Projects sort of outside the purview of what the council was working on, and seemed to be at odds with them. This is the new set of problems that we're seeing seem to stem from a power struggle between the city manager and the mayor. And you've written about that.
Indeed. So, when Mike Brennan was mayor, things have changed dramatically since Brennan was mayor and when Ethan was elected. When Brennan was mayor, they had a city manager who was very deferential in terms of his department heads. He wasn't what a lot of people would describe as like a strong manager. Like he wasn't, had a tight grip on things. He just kind of was pretty laid back. And from what I understand, Mayor Brennan was able to communicate directly with department heads and kind of do whatever he wanted in City Hall. And that led to like a lot of confusion and concern among city department heads because on the one hand, the mayor might be asking them to do things in a policy direction over here that may contradict what the city council as a whole might want or what the city manager might want. So
what areas did that play out in?
What's that?
What areas did that play out in? How did you?
Really, it was hard to really nail it down to any sort of like specific issue, but it always came up in like private conversations. Even when Mark Reese left and Sheila Hill Christian took over, when she left, she talked about, that the system itself, it's just, for staff, it can be really confusing because, you have the mayor who may want to do certain policy initiatives and staff doesn't know if he has the support of the council behind him or not. And, it was a really muddled sort of situation. So before Ethan was elected mayor, they hired John Jennings, and John Jennings came in promising to be a strong city manager, someone who was going to right the ship, put an end to city councilors calling, the public works department for their own district and getting their sidewalks fixed. And that's what he promised to do. And that council hired him to do that. And then they also elected Ethan Strimling, who he has been really focused on what's going on in Portland and what's in City Hall. And that, too, is a contrast with Mike Brennan, who spent a lot of his time up in Augusta, like advocating for state level policies. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, you had I don't want to say a weak city manager, Under
you can say it.
Okay,
I'll say it. He was weak
under Mike Brennan, and then Brennan would be like up in Augusta a lot of the time, and then people were kind of like, okay, who's driving this ship? And then the city did a complete 180, 4 years later, and then they have John Jennings, who's really focused on what's going on in City Hall, and he has a really strong idea what he likes, and so is the mayor, and they're both kind of like, obviously butting heads over that.
And they sought legal help to try to straighten this out?
They did. They've sought legal opinions from their own attorney, and then they hired the late Peter DeTroy to analyze the charter and try to shed a little light on how this mayor position is supposed to work. And, at the end of his analysis, he basically says, look, the mayor's power is one of comity. It's one of collaboration with the city council. It's one of, it's not one of basically the mayor issuing an edict and having people follow it. I mean, it's really this coalition building. It's really a collaborative effort.
It's funny, the old mayor that you talked about as ceremonial, at least was elected by a majority of the council and had already a kind of a constituency when it came to moving policy decisions. And now with it seems that both of the people who have been popularly elected mayors, feel like their policy agenda comes from the electorate at large, from the city at large, the people who voted for them, and they kind of coalesces into them through their person. I am the city. I embody the will of the people. And the councilors who are also elected independently are kind of like, what about us? That there seems to be this natural tension built into the system.
Well, yeah, and I mean, don't forget, the mayor's elected at large, but so are 3 other city councilors.
Yeah.
I mean, there are 3 other people sitting up on that dais that are elected by voters citywide, and then there are the 5 that have districts. It's just an interesting dynamic.
Right, it is, and I think there was fear that the mayor would be too powerful, but so far that really hasn't been the problem. And not that I'm saying that the problem is that the mayor is too weak, but that the problem has been that the mayor's power comes from the council, right? Anytime any power the mayor gains, it's the council is slightly less powerful, and that's been one of the big tensions with Michael Brennan, the first mayor. He wanted to set the agenda, and he wanted all agenda requests to come through him. And the council would have none of that.
Right.
And
yeah. They actually
to
voted to reassert that. Right. They called it a pocket veto. So basically,
Yeah.
if a councilor wanted to put an item on the agenda, he wanted the power to say, no, that doesn't go on the agenda. Mm-hmm. But the council got together and they took a vote to reaffirm that right. And, and there it is. I mean, and Ethan, Mayor Strimling, he also will point to this friction that's going on right now. And he's starting to make the case like, look, a lot of this is rooted in the fact that there are some people on the council who still haven't accepted that the voters of Portland want an elected mayor, and they want that elected mayor to carry out the policies that the mayor was presumably elected to do. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I think at some point there are people on both sides of this issue that are saying now, look, let's have a charter commission. Let's open this back up because we don't know. We don't think this is going to work. I mean, and you have a lot of people on one side that say we should just get rid of the elected mayor and go back to the way it was. And you got a lot of people on the other side saying we need a strong mayor and we should get rid of the city manager. So
yeah. So 2009, right? Is when the charter commission first came about. It was a long time ago.
It was a while ago. Yeah,
it was a
decade.
Yeah, it was I was younger and more idealistic then, and was a big proponent of this. I did not see this coming. I didn't see this kind of dysfunction coming, and I didn't hear from a lot of people who didn't like it. Were kind of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I always thought it was kind of broke. And I like to vote, so I like elections, and I like to have elected officials. But I like to choose elected officials. One complaint that I didn't really take seriously at the time that I'm starting to wonder about is a guy said he thought Portland was too small to have the talent pool for the enough choices for this position that we could have good quality people in charge. It's a very difficult job, and I didn't really appreciate how difficult it was, but it really is politically very, very difficult because you're required to have any power at all. You have to get councilors to work against their short-term interests, give up a little power to be able to form a more effective bloc. And what I've said to in columns about Strimling is if he could just get 4 councilors who agreed with him, he could tell John Jennings to back off, but he can't do that because he's alienated them. It appears, and so that's really. I mean, do you think it could possibly just be too complicated a job for the people who we have who are willing to try to do it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if I'd opine on that, but I think what a lot of the challenge is, like, this hybrid system is really unique to Portland, right? And the first mayor was trying to figure it out, and now this mayor is trying to figure it out. Like, it doesn't seem like anyone's really hit that sweet spot yet of what powers does this office have? How can it be most effective? And then once you kind of figure that out, it seems like, okay, now how do you get your policies through the powers that you have? I mean, the system itself the system hasn't figured itself out yet. And I think a lot of the critics of this position, may also point to the fact that, look, we're on our second mayor now, and it's also the second individual who has had no experience in municipal government. So Mike Brennan never served as a city councilor. Ethan Strimling never served as a city councilor. And I think, a lot of the growing pains comes from the fact that these guys, even though they had state level experience in the state legislature, they're faced with a completely different animal down at municipal government. And a lot of those growing pains is just figuring out what municipal government does as opposed to what state government does. And they're having a hard time burning their bridges, figuring that out.
Right.
Not burning them. Right,
because municipal government's all about delivering services.
It's about delivering services, and it's about property taxes.
And state government is, about making laws.
Absolutely, and I think you see that mayors coming in here, they want to make, bigger political statements like through their office, and but they'll be the first to tell you, what do people complain about the most? It's about trash. It's about litter. Yeah. It's about sidewalks. It's not necessarily about these like big ideals that rise to the state and national level.
Another one of the dumb things I may have said back then was that this was going to be an incredible stepping stone job, that there are so few kind of mid-level elected positions in Maine. Either the Congress people is pretty much it. Nobody runs statewide but the governor, and the mayor of the biggest city in the heart of the first district was going to be somebody, a very high-profile political position, and somebody might use that as a jumping-off point. And I don't think that anymore. I think it's a job designed to make you look bad.
Given the past 5 or 6 years, I mean, maybe that might be an accurate description, but it certainly, I think the potential still is there for it to be sort of a springboard. But I think, when you're trying to attract the type of people who would want to make it a springboard, I think that they're going to want to have like some real control and real power over what goes on in the city. And I think, maybe they think that that's what the job is when they're going into it, but when they show up, they're realizing that that's not what the job is. And I think that's where we're seeing like set up for failure, make you look bad, right? Because you're coming in there with one ideal and you're telling people this is what I'm going to do, but then when you actually get there, it's a completely different beast.
Yeah. So do you think, is there any real effort to have another charter commission?
I mean, I've heard that people are trying to figure out a way to make it work, but I think to make it work, form another charter commission. But I mean, there's a lot of hesitancy out there, on both sides of this, because a charter commission is elected, so it depends on who is elected to that commission, even though there are a few appointed members. And then when you have a charter commission, you open up the entire city charter for revision, so they could do sweeping changes to the city charter. And there's maybe a fear by some that what they want to get done the opposite might happen. Like the people who don't want an elected mayor, they're worried that maybe people will vote for a strong mayor, or people want a strong mayor. Maybe they'll go to the other way and eliminate the position altogether. There's a lot of uncertainty once you open it up. You can't focus it.
It seems like that's about a 2-year process, and at the end, the voters could just decide not to go, not to do anything.
Yeah, once you put something in the ballot box, you never know how an election is going to turn out. I mean, look at the presidential election that we just had, right? As soon as you think you got a grasp on conventional wisdom, and I think you got a good read on things. Voters are able to surprise you.
So one of the last changes that the Charter Commission came up with when they were designing this position was to try to give the mayor a little bit more power, make him look a little stronger, and they created a situation where the mayor could veto the budget. And Ethan Strimling has said he's thinking about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that work?
Mayor Brennan never did it, but the elimination of this assistant position has Ethan Strimling seriously considering. I saw him tell another news outlet that he's very seriously considering issuing a budget veto. So what that would mean is by the end of the day on Monday, the mayor has, if he wishes to veto the budget, he needs to deliver that veto message in writing to City Hall. It needs to be posted on the website. And then the city council will call a meeting to take up the veto, and they will have the ability to override that veto and it only takes 6 of the 9 councilors to override the budget veto. And it's important to note that the elimination of the assistant position was a 6-3 vote. So he would need to flip one of the councilors that voted to eliminate the position in order to sustain his veto. And then the overall budget itself passed 8-1. So he would have to convince the other 2 who supported the inclusion of his assistant in the budget to change their mind on the overall budget over that one position. It seems like a pretty steep hill.
So that's Monday?
That is Monday. We'll know by the end of the day Monday whether or not the mayor issues that veto.
And then otherwise going forward, what's next?
Well, that's the big question. I mean, if he doesn't veto the budget, then the council is stuck in this situation where the mayor has made it very clear that eliminating this position will only make things worse. It will make it more difficult for him to collaborate with the city council. So the question is, where does it go from here? I mean, does the mayor become irrelevant at that point, or who knows what happens? It's going to be interesting to see how and whether they can bridge this divide, or whether it's just going to be another 2.5 years of, waging campaigns against councilors who don't agree with his policy vision. Who knows?
Right. Okay. So that's the other avenue he could take. He could try to win over people on the council now, or he could try to replace them.
And, some political advocates in the community, progressive advocates, really like to point out that in the last election cycle, 2 of the mayor's harshest critics, Ed Suslovic and John Hink, were voted off the council, and they use that sort of as an implicit or explicit threat that if you continue to oppose and criticize the mayor, that you too are easily replaceable.
Well, this is really interesting stuff, and thank you for all the great reporting, and thanks for talking to us today, and look forward to seeing what you got next for us.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
Thanks for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast. Make sure you never miss a podcast episode by subscribing on iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. For more of our podcasts, visit pressherald.com/podcasts. Follow the link there to this episode to leave a comment. You can also leave a comment on our Facebook page. I'm Chad Gilley. Once again, thank you for listening to the Portland Press Herald podcast.